It's Song Talk Radio with Michael, Neil, Phil, and the gang.
Welcome to Song Talk Radio. This is the show with songwriters talking to other songwriters about the craft of songwriting. We share tips, tools, and techniques, and together we all become just a little bit better at writing songs. I'm your host, Neil Modi, and with me are only one of the action-ready members of the Song Talk Radio team. We have Mr. Phil Emery. How are you today, Phil?
I am doing quite well. My new home is going up to 15 degrees tomorrow, so I am very, very excited.
Beautiful. We got 20 degrees here in Toronto, so yeah. And in the meantime, please send your questions and comments to @Songtalk Radio or your weather reports on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, or feedback @songtalk.ca, and we'll share your thoughts on the show. And please visit us at songtalk.ca to find out how you can be a guest. And before we get to tonight's guest, once again, if you've been listening to the podcast lately, you know that our Song Talk Radio Songwriting Challenge has dropped. And Phil, why don't you tell the folks about the challenge?
Yes, the challenge this year is writing to a title, and that title is Why Do You Cry? Not Why Do You Fry or Why Do You Try? It is Why Do You Cry? And I've been watching a lot of Bake Off lately, and I felt like I'm starting to do a Bake Off thing. It can be any flavor you want. It can be any style you want. It can be any length you want. But it needs to have Why Do You Cry? I guess actually is the title of the song, ideally. And when you send in your songs, and we've had quite a few people send in their songs, give us a little paragraph about exactly how you've come to this point. What steps you took in writing the songs, what challenges that you had, and what insights, because the best things about doing these kinds of challenges is that it actually pushes you as a songwriter, and those insights, even though you might not wind up with a song that you absolutely love, can actually benefit you as you go along in your songwriting career.
Oh, yeah, like any kind of realizations or insights or learnings. Or anything. It's an interesting process, especially because, like you say, because you're being pushed in a way that you wouldn't have done otherwise, because you're being assigned something. And we as the hosts, Phil, Mike, and myself, have started to share our answers to the challenge. I did my answer to the challenge on last week's episode, which is now published. And next week, Mike's going to do his, and 2 weeks after that, Phil's going to do his.
Yes.
And in a couple of weeks after that, we'll do an episode or two featuring your songs, featuring the listener songs. And that's why we want you to send in a little paragraph about your songwriting process, because obviously we can't have everybody on the show to talk about their songs. But if we have a little snippet from you, we can express what you were feeling going through, and everyone can share in everyone else's process. And learn from everybody else. And that's kind of the point.
Indeed. It was interesting with the show that you did, Neil, last week. And we were talking about, how to, because Why Do You Cry? It kind of seems like it could be kind of a sad thing. And I was actually working on last week's show and making me not sound as horrible as I normally do through the miracle of technology. And I came up with a bit of an epiphany, and I actually completely changed the approach to my song.
Oh, really? You want to share your epiphany?
Well, because I was going to be doing it as sort of a relationship thing, and about between two people, and I'm not sure what it was. And there's something about doing something very repetitive, and our new house now has a dishwasher, so I don't wash dishes anymore. And I used to get a lot of ideas like washing dishes. When you're doing something kind of repetitive, your mind can. Yeah,
that's true. That's very true. Yeah.
So the stuff you're doing with a podcast, you're kind of taking out ums and clicks and hums and stuff. And I just sort of thought, well, instead of it being sort of part of a conversation, it could be something more declarative. Mm-hmm. As well, why do you cry? What makes you cry? What makes you react? And then using that as sort of and it's something that I've heard other songwriters do that I really like this approach, and I don't want to spoil it too much because I might change it again. But it's something I've never done before, and it's actually kind of effective, and actually has resulted in finished lyrics that were much faster than they are normal, because it's a bit kind of a formula, but it kind of works. It's something I've never done before, so it's kind of cool, because it's actually this. Because I am writing the lyrics first, it's a very different approach for me. I'm usually a music first guy, so the lyrics first will be very different. So it's kind of cool.
Yes, it sounds like for this challenge especially, it's pushing you in a direction you're not used to.
It really has. So I'm kind of excited about it. So
that's awesome. Great.
So there you go.
We're looking forward to hearing all about that in a few weeks. Okay, tonight we are welcoming singer-songwriter Susan Cattaneo from Boston, and here's a small taste of her song, Blackbirds.
Blackbirds fill my head sometimes. Dark words, my mouth gives them wings to fly. Old stories feel like nursery rhymes. You tell each one by heart and I tell mine. I tell mine.
With her powerful voice, captivating melodies, and fine-crafted lyrics, Susan Cattaneo is one of Boston's most respected singer-songwriters. A compelling performer and vivid storyteller, Susan's music blends folk, rock, and blues with a hint of country. Following up on the success of her chart-topping double album, The Hammer and the Heart, Susan released All Is Quiet in April of 2022. Critics, audiences, and fellow artists have instantly connected with the personal nature of Susan's songs. She is a 3-time Kerrville New Folk finalist and a 3-time nominee for Best Americana Artist at the Boston Music Awards, and she won the 2018 CT Folk Festival. Her last album, The Hammer and the Heart, charted #1 on the Billboard Heat Seekers chart and yielded a #1 song on folk radio and a top 10 album of 2017. Welcome to Song Talk Radio, Susan.
Hi, you guys. How are you?
We're doing great. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Thank you for having me. And I love what Phil was saying about like rewriting songs, because I'm all about that.
Okay. Well, following up on what Phil was saying, how do you start songs? Are you a lyrics first person or a music first person, or in between somewhere?
Well, I definitely think that I go for the words first, because for me, I kind of have to know the direction of the song. And so I usually start with the hook or the title of the song, and I will write from there. So I usually write the chorus first. And once I have the hook, then I start vocalizing it, because I'm a singer second, probably. And so I'll usually create the chorus first and then write the verses around it. I've done both, where I've done music first and then done the words, and I've done word first and done the music. And I find that probably the most authentic songs for me are when the words and the music are kind of occurring at the same time. So, like switching instruments, I play piano and guitar and kind of going back and forth between those. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's kind of the way that I work, and I think a lot of people work. That the hook or the melody of the title or the chorus comes around the same time, and then you write your verses or a little bit back and forth. But at least at the very genesis of a song, for you, I think it sounds like it's words.
It's words, yeah.
Do you purposely go out to write a chorus? You think are you starting off thinking, okay, I'm working on the chorus as sort of a decision?
It's kind of the anchor of the song for me, and certainly like I'm definitely like willing and totally accept the idea of things being fluid and things being changing. So I'm never really hard focused on what it is, but I'm usually like, okay, this is going to be like the theme of the song. And so I'll try and create a melody around that. And I'm like, okay, what's a pretty high melody? So my verse melody is going to be lower than that. And so, yeah, I usually do create the chorus first. I have friends that write kind of first line in, and they don't even know what the title of the song is. They'll just start with like a line, and it'll be like the first line of verse 1. And then they'll eventually uncover whatever the song was about. And I have tried to write that way, and it makes me insane because I'll end up with like 5 different potential ideas for the chorus, and I can't seem to settle on one. So I think for me, I like to kind of start at what I feel is like the apex of the song, and then kind of work backwards or forwards from there. So, yeah.
That's a really interesting approach, because when you start with the chorus, you're starting, arguably anyway, with the high energy part of the song. Right. So in some ways, it's kind of easier to strip away stuff and get to a verse, as opposed to writing a really compelling verse and obsessing over it. And then when you hit time for the chorus, it's like, well, how come my chorus isn't really jumping out as much as it should, or doesn't have that lift that it should, because maybe you spent so long obsessing over verses.
Right.
I've done that too.
And sometimes also like you'll come up with like a really cool melodic thing that's in your verse, and it's like, oh shoot, but that's like the coolest melodic part, and it really probably should be in the chorus. So that's also something where sometimes I found like the little yummy section, and I'm like, oh shoot, it's in the verse, and I really want to put it in the chorus because that'll be the place that everybody remembers. So
right.
Yeah.
Although sometimes I find that, like with my songwriting challenge we were just talking about, I think I had the idea and had the title, obviously, because the title was assigned, but I did write the verses first because I kind of needed the verses to sort of tell me more specifically what the central idea of the chorus was going to be, because I hadn't fully settled on what the specifics of that was. So I think I think you got to let the narrative and the story and the song itself kind of tell you what it needs next, and go that way, you know.
I agree.
Do you go through a lot of editing while you're working with your songs? I mean,
well, it's so funny because yes, I am a huge editor, and I'm an editor. Not only like, I also write songs a lot when I'm walking the dog. I know you talked about like doing dishes. And for me, some of the best stuff I've come up with has been like, as I'm driving to the supermarket in the car, or as I'm walking the dog. And so I'm constantly like working and refining, but it's interesting for me, like songs kind of come out, and it's almost like I have a puzzle in front of me. Like I have all the pieces, and I just keep trying them in different places. I'm like, oh, is this where it goes? It's like, no, I don't like that. Oh, is this where it goes? And then eventually it settles into like, I got it. I figured it out. So, yeah.
Do you write? Okay. Like I'm kind of eager to get into Blackbirds a little bit, because I want to talk to you about metaphor writing. Like,
right.
Is that a thing that's typical for, like, because this is something I really struggle with in terms of, I've got an idea for something, but then I really struggle to find what's the metaphor for that. What's the equivalent sort of abstract idea? Because I don't want to say it plainly.
Yeah.
Is that something that kind of comes natural to you, or?
Yeah, because I think I'm a very visual writer. I tend to like songs that have a lot of imagery in them, things that you can, when you're listening to them, you can see stuff. But I also occasionally am a private person. And there are things that, like, if I actually wrote what really happened, you know, I don't know that I'd want to really share that. But so metaphor is kind of a way to cheat that system a little bit. And the thing that's so funny about Blackbirds is that, so the song idea, the thing that I came up with was, I've been married for almost 30 years, and I come from divorced parents, and my husband comes from parents that are still together. And that means that when we have conflict, it's a very different outcome, I guess. For me, the idea of divorce is a possibility. It's always a possibility. And for him, it's like, no, of course not. We're just having an argument. And so the concept was I wanted to write a song about how when two people come together in a relationship with different pasts, that they can have a different interpretation of what a happy ever after means. And so that was the concept. And I was like, well, do I want to write about my husband and us being together for 30 years? Like, I don't know. I just didn't want to do that. So
let's drop his name in there, shall we?
Right. Yeah, exactly. So I was like, no, I want to kind of cloak it in metaphor. And so I thought, how interesting that I'm talking about like our childhood, like how we were raised. And so for me, the idea of writing through fairy tale was really interesting. So I started then I go research, research fairy tales. And I found the 4 and 20 blackbirds baked in a pie, and I thought, I'm going to write about that. So then I found out that blackbirds were like an omen for change, and they're also an omen for death. And I thought that was also really interesting. And so I was committed. So then I wrote this song, this one that you are going to hear, but it was a totally different thing. I went all literary on it. So it was like, I literally had 24 blackbirds in this song. I named them all. It was like one for sadness and one for grief and one for shame. And I know them all by name. And it was so clever. It was so clever. And there was no heart in the song. Kind of hated it. And so I put it together. I had music. I had this whole thing. It was a very complicated musical structure, complicated lyric. And I thought, well, I just really don't like the song. And, I sat on it for about 3 weeks, and I was like, I really love this idea, though. I really like this concept. And so what I did, which I think people say not to do, but I literally threw the baby and the bathwater out completely. And I was like, I'm just going to start fresh. I want the song to be much more simple. And I'm going to only reference the folk tale, the folk stuff. I'm going to incorporate other ones. So there's a line about the dish running away with the spoon. And I was like, that's those two people feel good together because they're running off together. Whereas me, I'm a little insecure. And so I then the song kind of came together really, really quickly after that. It was so funny after struggling, writing, I almost had to write my way through it to actually get a song that I felt said what I wanted it to say. So, so it's kind of like a lesson in, I guess, there were things, especially that whole part where I named all the blackbirds. I loved that part. I was in love with that part. It was very literary. It was very thoughtful. It was very clever. And I kept rewriting and being like, yeah, but that part has to stay. I don't care what I'm doing. That part has to stay. And it was finally when I was like, okay, I'm going to throw out that part that I thought was the most important part in the song, that I actually ended up writing the song. So for me, the lesson is sometimes when you're writing, you're holding on so desperately to this thing that you're like, this has to be in the song. And when you actually think about it and be like, no, I'm just going to let it go. For some reason, that really opens up the creative portal and lets stuff come out and I also changed the tempo and the feel as well when I wrote the new version of it. Right. It just became, I was like, okay, it's a whole new board. Same concept, same metaphor, same idea, but we're seeing it through a different lens. I love the verb, or I love the noun revision, because I like to revision, to re-see something, see it in a different way. And so for me, writing the song was really, it was kind of an exercise in getting out of my own way.
Wow. I love this song. I want to talk about musically because it's not, sometimes there's a lot of stuff, a lot of folk music, which is G, C, A minor, D, and nothing wrong with that. But musically, this is a really interesting song. Can you talk about the chord choices that you've used?
I ended up trying to think of what keys. I wrote it, it's on a capo, but I wrote it actually initially in the key of D. And so it goes to a a D, and then it goes to like a minor. I love this kind of exchange between major and minor. I do that a lot in my songs, actually. And so the verses are in D, and then the chorus is actually in G. It resolves to G, and then it goes back to D again. And so it actually has simple chords. But what I did is, when I'm trying to kind of create, it sounds very Californian of me, but I like the idea of thinking about chords in terms of shadow and light. So that's how I think about them. So when I'm in a minor key, I feel like I'm kind of in shadow. And when I switch to major keys, I feel like there's a moment of sunlight. So in the chorus, for example, I use an A major chord, which is not, it shouldn't be in there. It's like the 2 major of the G.
Right.
And so for me, that lifts up the song. There's like a moment where the song lifts up, and it's on the words happy ever after. And so you feel like, oh, there's a change, right? And so, I think I'm constantly in a lot of my songs, I'll be in a major key, and then, you'd normally go to a 5 major chord, and I'll go to a 5 minor chord. Or, in a regular diatonic key, you'll have a 3 minor, and I will go to a 3 major. So I'm constantly kind of experimenting with major minor. And I recommend that. I think that's a really wonderful thing to do. I write in modes a lot as well. I don't know how in depth we go into, but
lots of because it seemed very modal when I heard it.
Yeah, it is. It is. And so I like mixo a lot. Mixolydian is when it's got a flat 7 chord in, it's got a 5 minor in it. So for me, like modal interchange, which means that you'll be playing in a diatonic key and you borrow chords from other areas. The Beatles do it a lot.
Yep.
So you'll have like a pre-chorus that will go into a different key for just a moment and then back out again. I love stuff like that. I think it creates so much more of an interesting texture than the normal kind of 1-4-5 cowboy chords, which I also love as well.
Yeah.
And I think like there's a time and a place for them, right? Because if you think about the 1-4-5 to 6 minor thing that everybody does, because it's such a familiar scaffolding for a song, it can allow for really complex lyric because we're not thinking too much about what's going on in the chordal bed. And so for me, I also really, I love simple chords because then I can have really complex lyrics. So
these chords are actually all very sort of pretty straightforward. I mean, they're not even inversions.
They're not complicated. It's just a matter of kind of like getting your ear used to it.
Yeah. Well, like you say, it's just borrowing from other keys,
right.
which is something I do a lot as well. But it's interesting how you're talking about lining it up with the lyric, because it's one thing to just do it for the sake of, it's just a fun thing to do musically, but how do you actually line it up? Like you're talking about light and dark and your shadow, right? Like how do you line it up with the light in the lyric and the shadow in the lyric?
Exactly.
And all that sort of stuff. And that's what we like to refer to as prosody, right? Where the music and
that's what we teach.
Are kind of pushing in the same direction in some kind of harmonious way. But the other thing I want to comment about your completely demolishing the song and writing it again, I fully support that. I think it's a great idea. I don't do it very often, but the times I've done it, I've actually hated the first version. There was nothing good about it, so there was nothing I needed to keep. So I wasn't really holding on to anything. but what it does for you, it is, at least in my experience, is that it's sort of like method of elimination. Like now I know what not to do, and that gives me greater focus to know what to do.
Well, yeah. And I think definitely. And I think also, when you're writing and when you're in the weeds of writing, there really is this sense of, I feel like, you're in the speaking of the weeds, you're in like a jungle and you've got a pocket knife and you have to get to a gorilla that's in the jungle. And you're like, what? I'm trying to get through here. And I think anything that can kind of shake that and give you a lease on life, change the air in the room. There's so many things that I love I love when writers come to me and say that they have writer's block, because I am so into finding ways to avoid, jump over, dig under, crawl my way through to a song that you want to write. And I think that sometimes the idea of getting rid of what you've been holding on to so tightly can feel really freeing. Like, absolutely. I think that that's one of the best, that. And also, sometimes I really will, I'll start a song, even the idea, like your idea of, why do you cry? Like, so Phil said, you were like, well, that's kind of a sad song. Well, does it have to be a sad song?
Nope.
For me, it'd be like, well, okay, my first reaction is, oh, it'll be a sad song. And why do you cry? Like what that, but what if it's like a happy song?
What if it's like, tears of joy?
What if it was tears? What if it was like, what if it's an angry song? So it's an up-tempo angry song. Like, why do you cry every single time we get it in? You just, you turn on the waterworks and I feel bad. Why do you cry? So there's a way to kind of, and that's kind of exciting, the idea of kind of thinking of a different path to a song idea. I love that. For me, the idea of songwriting being a fluid thing, it also helps sometimes to just be like silly, because, you've got this judgment thing on your shoulder all the time, kind of saying, you're bad, you're writing bad things. Why are you writing stuff? You shouldn't be writing. You should be, working at Denny's or whatever. And I think that like when you kind of change it up, you have this sense of feeling really free. You have the sense of like, I can do whatever I want, and then I think you feel more creatively in the flow, right?
Well, let's take a listen, and we'll have more to talk after the song.
Blackbirds fill my head sometimes. Dark words, my mouth gives them wings to fly. Feel like nursery rhymes. You tell each one by heart, and I tell mine. I tell mine. You say we belong in a happy ever after, but I hear the song. Come true. You believe in us, so I guess I believe in us too. You're so sure we're gonna make it through, hand in hand like a dish running away with a spoon. Say we belong in a happy ever after. Maybe you're wrong. Say 4 and 20 blackbirds, 4 and 20 blackbirds. Ooh. Sighs. You hold me so I won't say goodbye. I wish I may, I wish I might send those blackbirds back to once upon a time. You say we belong in a happy ever after, but I sing the song of 420 blackbirds, 420 blackbirds, 420 blackbirds. Ooh,
Awesome.
Beautiful.
Thanks. Thank you. The other thing that happened with that song that kind of happened with the whole album is that I really on purpose, I wrote it in D, but then I capoed it up higher so that it really is in a very much higher range than I normally sing in. I'm an alto. So, I'm an alto and I do like the, I can really, but I don't know. Like all the songs I wrote for All Is Quiet I'm in a much higher register. And I think that lends itself to a different quality in my voice. And also really kind of, in many ways, it freed me up to try things, to try and be a little less, as a singer, and I'm sure you guys have this, you want to be perfect. You want to be like the best. And I think being that vulnerable, being that high up, you can't necessarily be perfect. You have to be more about feel. It has to be more about like, how can you deliver the song? So
Interesting choice. Yeah. I kind of can't imagine it if it was lower. That would be weird, maybe.
Yeah.
But it was funny that when you were talking about the first version of the song, you're talking about how you love all the names of all the blackbirds. I'm like, that could be your bridge. That could be your bridge.
Yeah, I know. Totally right. I know.
Right, but now that I'm listening to this, I kind of feel like this song doesn't want a bridge.
Well, believe me, I kept trying to put it in there because I was like, I want to have that part.
Bridge.
But no, and it was so funny. I had not done the ooh, I had not had that part, but like by clearing out the waters, I was like, I had suddenly room for this vocal thing. That then, we went into the studio. I worked with Kevin Barry and Duke Levine, and Kevin Barry was the one that put the mandolin on that.
I was going to ask, is that a mandolin? Because it's bloody gorgeous.
Oh,
it's a beautiful part.
It's like, and he was like, I just wanted to kind of create a musical version of what you were doing vocally that sounded bird-like. And I was like, fabulous. So.
That ooh thing that you were talking about, those tags, Neil, that was this thing I was talking to you about, when you're sort of connecting between your verse and your chorus.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. And it doesn't have to be much. Sometimes just a ooh can be enough.
Yeah, just 2 or 3 notes or something. Yeah, that's a good point.
Right.
What's so interesting in the song is so often in North American music is our lines go down to resolve. Da 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 da. But all your lines go up at the end.
Yes.
Which is so cool.
Well, and so speaking of prosody, which I'm a huge fan of prosody, and, for me, I wanted to keep it lifted because I wanted there to be like a flight aspect to it. So that was totally intentional. And I'm so psyched that you heard it because I did it on purpose. It was like, I just wanted this whole song to be like lifted and kind of like fluttery.
Well, yeah, there is this kind of ethereal airiness to the whole thing. I think part of it is your upper register. Part of it is the shapes of the melodies are actually really surprising. It kind of, I'm not a huge Joni Mitchell fan, but it really, really reminded me, it made me feel like it was a Joni Mitchell song, like very, like melodies with really, really unique, interesting shapes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Which and I think that's a great, like your singing gives them wings to fly, and why not?
Right.
It's kind of obvious, but
the line, of 420 blackbirds has got such a great rhythm to it that it just kind of propels the chorus. And I love there's a modulation that you do coming out of the chorus, which is so cool because again, you're not just sort of like doing your verse, you're doing your chorus, and then kind of changing. There's sort of the last line, there's a bit of a change there. I'm not sure what you do there, but it's really, really nice, and it's gentle. There's so much happening here. This is probably why you don't need a bridge, because it's not like anything is dull. And there's a really nice soft rhyme in "Happy Ever After" and "Blackbirds."
Right.
Love
exactly.
It's a really soft rhyme, but it is a rhyme.
Yes.
Which I thought was so cool.
Nice. Thank you.
It is. It's a great song. Just.
I love how the verse 2 is actually, it's not radically different than verse 1, but it's different.
Right.
It's got a different melody at the end. It really goes to a different place. For you kids out there, this is how you do a verse 2. It's clearly related to verse 1, but it's got enough of a change. I struggle with that. My verse 2 is always melodically exactly the same as verse 1. And then
I have a point of discussion I'd
yes.
like to bring out.
Please.
So because it's something I've played around a lot with my songs, because we're writing songs to. Oh, I don't know why we do write songs. Anyways, we're writing songs and we're trying to, have the songs memorable. And there's different ways we can do that. And you can do that through repetition. So I was thinking, so for a while I was doing like verse, chorus. Verse 2 would be a variation. And then verse 3 would be a repetition of the chorus first. But then I realized, well, that's not really a repetition, because it hasn't, like someone listening to it the first time, like there's almost too much variation. And I wonder where that variation should go. Should it go in like the third or fourth verse, or in the second? Because it's, I don't know.
I mean, I think for me, there is delight and also interest that happens when you change an established pattern. So I think what happens is that sometimes the songwriter hasn't really established the pattern enough before they're off to the races changing it to something else. And I think that what I like in songs is when, as a listener, it's like, this is the form. And you're like, okay, I got the form. I got it. No problem. Right. And then you hear the second verse, or in this case, the third verse. So 2 verses and then the middle verse after the first chorus. And you're kind of used to it at that point. And so if you change stuff in the back half of the verse, then it can be a really delightful surprise for the listener. And also, because it's a change, they're going to really suddenly be like, wait, whoa, what's happening? So they're really listening. And so it actually is a great place to put a highlighting idea that you want to have. So it's a really good place to like put something that you're telling us something, you're revealing something there. That's a good place to create a change. I feel like for me, like a change should never be random. A change should be because there's something either additional that you want to say, or there's some kind of evolution that's happening in the narrative. So for example, what I like to do a lot of the time is I like to mess with line length. Not necessarily, I don't think I did it in Blackbirds, although I have an added line in Blackbirds, but so I'll have like it da 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 da. And so that third line is suddenly kind of magical because you're like, wait, what's going on? It's different. It's changed. I'm going to really pay attention to what she or he is singing right here because it's different. And so I think like when you alter a verse, be aware that it's a really powerful tool to use and make sure to use it to its best ability.
Yeah. And it's especially effective, maybe it's effective and easier in a song like this, where you've given, it's not a lot of space, but there's enough space to play around.
Right.
Like if it's a very highly structured dance piece or rock song, there's not a lot of wiggle room.
No. Well, and also like, what's the point? Like you have to think like, what's the point of a song like that? Right. So they have different purposes. So my purpose is probably like to have people like listen and be like, as opposed to like a dance song, which would be like the point of this song is to get up and like move your body. So I'm not going to kind of mess with it too much because it really is about like creating like rhythm and movement.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is definitely a A great song. And you teach? Do you teach songwriting?
I do. I taught songwriting at Berkeley for 20 years and
wow.
taught in the songwriting department. And then the pandemic happened and I taught remotely for a year and a half. And then when everybody was going back on campus, I was like, I don't want to do that anymore. So I made the decision. I'm like, I want to just write music. So I quit a year ago this month. 20 years of my life. I know, crazy. But I still teach. I teach Berkeley online. So I still teach at Berkeley, but I'm just not on campus. And so it's been amazing. I think we counted the other day that I've worked on something like 15,000 songs. That's a lot of songs. But it's been great. I mean, I think I'm so glad that I was there. It's a wonderful school and it's a wonderful department. The songwriting department is terrific. But I always had one foot in the academic world and one foot in the artist world, and collaboration, and I produce and whatever. And I just really wanted to see, like, what is it like when I do that full time? What happens? So I'm kind of in like a new phase of my career and my life, and I'm really excited about it.
That's so awesome.
Yeah. And it's still like, I teach privately and I still, I do workshops and stuff. So I'm not out of the teaching game. I'm just not having to be on campus 3 days a week, from 8:30 to 7:30 at night. So it's wonderful to not have to go into Boston and fight the traffic.
There's always that.
Yeah.
Come to St. John's, there's no traffic out here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Susan. Awesome. That's all the time we have tonight on Song Talk Radio. Special thanks to Susan Cattaneo. And where can our listeners find more of your music?
SusanMusic.com and on all social platforms. I'm everywhere.
Awesome. And we will post links to all that stuff on the show notes on songtalk.ca. And we want to hear from you, our listeners. So please send us your comments on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram to @SongTalkRadio, or send us an email, feedback@songtalk.ca. Also, be sure to check out our YouTube channel for live performance videos and full episodes now that we're all in these virtual boxes. We've been saying that for a while now that it's been like 2.5 years. We've all been in virtual boxes. Subscribe today to the Song Talk Radio podcast on your favorite podcast provider, and don't forget to sign up for our free newsletter at songtalk.ca. You can find links to all our products, books, and web services we mentioned on the show on our resources page on the website. And wherever you are in the world, Boston included, please join us online via Zoom at our next monthly Song Talk meetup. It's free to join on meetup.com and free to attend the meetup. Stop by songtalk.ca for the link. You can follow me at neilmodi.com. You can follow Phil.
PhilEmery.ca.
And Susan, what's your favorite social media channel?
Facebook or Instagram.
Facebook or Instagram?
Yeah, both. I like both.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening, everybody. And be sure to stop by the website, songtalk.ca, to browse past shows and find out how you can be a guest. Stay safe, everyone, and keep on writing.
Good night.
Woohoo!
So long.
Song has a cowbell in it. What a friggin' great show. Holy dude.